Elections and the society is an important topic because we have just covered and finished the municipal elections, including in Moscow, and this question is also of relevance because we are on the eve of presidential elections, and in the end of the 18th of 2018, we are waiting for Moscow mayoral elections, Moscow mayor's election, and the next parliamentary elections, although they only took place last year. And the next elections to the Duma will take place in 2021, but it's not much of a time because as I'm talking to many people and they are generally telling me that time flies, and so they may not even have time to rethink the results of some elections, and the time has come to already think about future elections. So these elections may also be quite unexpected. One thinks that 2021 is some time away, but this is not much of a room for thought, because preparation will start in 2019. What do we see by the results of Levada Center polls? We can see lowering of interest in the elections, which is a very well-known fact, something that is supported by figures, statistical figures, and we're seeing here how the number of people who have dwindled in terms of those who are interested or attentive or non-attentive in terms of following the results of the elections. So it is also well known that to the questions of sociologists, many of people are asking for and are looking for these elections. It's like the good old film, the Russian film, The Gatehouse of Pokrov. And we can definitely see the dwindling of the numbers who are simply not following the electoral campaign. There is very low interest in the debates when taking decisions. Of course, there have been great political debates in the 1990s, but this diminishing is certainly dictated by certain factors. 2007 was a great, as they say, glorification of the sovereign democracy. 7 political parties were admitted to the electoral campaign, but only 27% believed that debates are important. The number of parties admitted to elections has gone up, so the role of debates must have gone up. But in fact, we're seeing that today the vast majority of the respondents are not interested in the political debates. And even though there have been some sort of sharp debates. We can see this as a general decreasing tendency. One can make a conclusion, which is that people are getting tired of politics because elections cannot change a life of a person towards the better. However, we're also seeing two interesting points here. While we're seeing a decrease in the interest towards politics, but here there is a stagnation in the number of people who think if elections can change the life for the better. So from 3 to 5%, there are more people who hope that the elections may influence their lives. This did not much foster optimism, but one can see that in 2003 and 2016 parliamentary elections, these same figures can probably be extrapolated to gubernatorial elections, presidential elections. Not much has changed, and apathy has been growing. One other interesting slide. Then why do people wish to participate in the electoral campaigns? Why do they go to the ballot box? And here, when you look at the numbers, I think we're seeing the most interesting result. For 10 years, the number of those who believe that it's a civic duty, this number has gone down almost twofold, from 61 to 36%. Everything else, in terms of the responses, has been going up or down a little bit, but it's not so tremendously important because the numbers do not seem to be particularly important here. But when people are asked why do they go for elections, it seems that the logical answer is to help their parties to win. And here it's a very unpopular answer. People usually think that they can't help their party, and such things as a habit, or that their relatives or family members go to elections, and that's why I go for elections. So some of these answers are a lot more popular than a rational desire to help friends. In the second place, we can see a desire to express one's political position, and here we can see some other cases. And 30% have said that such a party is absent. And if we see that there is a party which has interesting ideas, this is not to say that there would be a general interest in voting for it. The fact that about 30% of those polled have a protest potential, and that's a big number. Clearly, most of these are absentee voters. They do not see the parties, and there are different opinions about this. There is no one single idea, but the topic that the political system is unjust and that the relations between the society and the state is not just plays a significant role for the absentees. In 2017, this various autumn, Levada Center conducted a research as to how mayors should have been elected. Two-thirds of the respondents have said that it's better to have a popular vote. There have been other questions. How would you vote if there is a mayor or governor that you trust, but at least the majority still think that nothing can help or change things. However, I have offered this slide not to show how our citizens value the institution of elections, but to remind ourselves of the fact that no retiring or indeed a dismissal of any mayor or governor has not led to any protests. So while people are willing to elect or vote for the boss of a city or the regions, they're usually not interested in upholding their position. Generally speaking, this is an inherent trait of the modern Russian politics, that the politician usually does not evoke big emotions. If he is in the arena and on the political stage, it's all right. If he disappears, it's his problem. I remember the big upheaval of the Rodina party, and there was this effect of the disengagement with Mr. Zyuganov and the Communist Party, and Rodina used of this, and then Dmitry Rogozin disappeared. He disappeared from the big politics, and there was not much interest. Then he resurfaced as a diplomat. Then he resurfaced as a vice prime minister. It's all good. If tomorrow he's fired from vice prime ministerial position, he will not be particularly missed. As I've already said, there have been gubernatorial elections, and the overall success of Единая Россия does not seem to be particularly convincing because of the lack of competition. So the municipal filter has become stronger. The practice of applying this municipal filter has developed, and this happens together with some talk about the change of this municipal filter, but neither Mr. Roisman nor Mr. Markhaev in Buryatia could not overcome this filter or seep through this filter. In Mariel, the situation is somewhat different because the government made an alliance with the communist opposition, and they distributed the posts, but eventually they got pretty much the same results. And in terms of the rising apathy, it may be of interest to remember the, say, beginning of the century, some 16 years ago. Let me take the region of Arkhangelsk, where the incumbent was very active in eliminating the opposition candidates, at least from the electoral campaign. And while he did not become a particularly successful head of Arkhangelsk region, but at that time the voters could punish, still could punish them by not voting. But such now we're seeing apathy rather than any protest, rather than any protest voting. The more so that the acting governor has been recommended by the president. So why is it that the voters act like this? It is true that they never particularly could hope for a change, but I think the first explanation is alienation from people, from the government and politics. So this slide shows motivation of participation in the elections, and people think that elections is not about their right to participate in politics because they do not influence politics at all. The second peculiarity here, talking of the change of generations, the decrease in as they say, the political sacrality, and the inability to stand up for their choice. Generations come and go, and there is the ongoing decrease in the sacred nature of power. So the civic duty, which was a formula quite inherent or characteristic for the Soviet tradition, is quickly waning. This is due to the actual egress or indeed demise of a part of the voters who believed that voting is a civic activism or civic duty. But this is not the most important reason. I think that this is related to the fact, among other things, that the Soviet mentality is going away, and these lofty formulas about politics being a duty these have become archaic, even for those. And the third problem, as I have said, is the inability to stand up for one's choice. So civics is often perceived as something happening in different dimensions or different fields. So against this background of fatigue, and we have a very fatigued society, by the way, and I have once said during one of the seminars at school, I said once here at school that there can be 4 phases which could characterize our political process after 2014. And I will remind this position. The first phase is euphoria. The euphoria say the Crimea has been acceded and tomorrow something else will come and nothing bad happened. After we brought Crimea in, then the second thing is to view crime as crisis as a chance. We'll have a big development of the domestic work and domestic industry, the surge, and the third one is the fatigue and apathy, which is where we are, and the fourth one is looking for the way out. But this minority is already starting this. We're seeing some rallies of Mr. Navalny across the country. 6 rallies have taken place, and he was detained today, and they feel that it is not particularly a benign thing for the authorities. The government is afraid, and this has already been seen during the spring rallies of Mr. Navalny, and this tendency continues today. So this is not just about the capital, but also about the regional centers where thousands of people come out. And the results of we have seen here how the opposition has gone into conflicts, and there's some of those who go for Mr. Navalny, those who go for Mr. Gudkov, there are those who have resolved to participate in the municipal rallies on Sunday, and the conflicts surge, but the question really is to what extent these deputies and MPs may become efficient. But what is important here is that against the background of a low turnout of voters, the protest electorate is becoming mobilized, and for the first time after 2013 we have seen how this electorate is achieving some results. So in the Soviet times, this majority was eroding swiftly. This is not something that we can see for now, because when we look at the elections in the capital of Russia and compare this to the elections of 1990, when the opposition was dominant in all regions of Moscow, from the downtown to Zelenograd or some other peripheries. Nowadays, we're seeing that 75% of mandates are retained by Единая Россия party in these district council. So the situation is somewhat different. So the question really is how will the majority erode, but the scale is yet to be seen. Levada Center has conducted a somewhat provocative poll.
They asked a question: do you want to vote for Andrei Semyonov, who has been appointed successor to a president. And 18% in different kinds say that yes, they would vote for him. That survey, what is interesting about it, there are two ways. Firstly, they pay attention to this 18%, 18%, that this electorate is at all present. This is electorate that accounts actually for the nucleus of those who are for the government. They don't really care two pins about the government. They got a president whom they comes, be it Medvedev, Ivanov, Sidorov, whosoever, it does not really matter to them. He's just prepared to support any decision taken by the president. 18% stand for a huge figure. It's a dream come true for most Western parties to get as much. But there's still a minority that is pro-president. There is a vast periphery there. This periphery supports the president. It does not want to see an alternative. And this periphery at the parliamentary elections voted for United Russia in its majority. Just part of them split, but they were not that many. As a long result, the party got a constitutional majority. But this periphery is thinking about it, is having doubts. It has many trends, and there are different trends in favor of the government. And this is the periphery that will be this something that the whole struggle, electoral struggle, will be for. And with the serious places where this fight may take place, there will be two election campaigns. This is the election of mayor of Moscow in 2018. I tend to think that government in these has preferential chances, given the figure I gave you, as 76% of deputies are from United Russia Party. Moreover, there's a feeling that the opposition can look at the figures, and figures show that the regions where the opposition won, they almost all elected, all their resources have been exhausted almost. The votes submitted for them were as many as for their candidates in 2016, as many votes as were given in 2014 at Moscow State Duma elections. Since now the turnout at the election is less, they now have a serious chance which they have used. And now, still, the mayor's election will be interesting, will be serious, and it will depend on what will be the candidates. If they come up, an alternative figure should show up, then the fight may be pretty serious. In parliamentary election of 2021, as already said, they're not that far away, and preparation for them will really be very serious. So there is, if we look at it, at government projections, they're pretty optimistic that they will see growth, but this growth, to which extent they will be able to ensure people's well-being, because it is limited, and this explosion-like growth cannot be expected, what we saw in 1990s. And clearly the government will have to take very unpopular decisions before the end of presidential campaign, and this may influence this. The periphery could influence much more serious manner than the official statistics or assessments by economists about economic growth, that it is well comparable with what we see in largest countries. But the people don't look at statistics. People just are guided by their understanding. whether the situation is improving or getting worse, whether they're willing to carry on. So the risks for the authorities, even electoral risks for the authorities, are rising. Thank you.